Hello, everybody. My name is Angela Waldron, and I am the Registrar at the Farnsworth Art Museum. Maine has a centuries-old history of attracting artists captivated by the state's natural beauty and the quiet ethos of its hardworking inhabitants. Over a period of many decades, nationally renowned photographer George Tice and the late artist Andrew Wyeth were drawn to Maine, inspired both by the state's past and a present that speaks to the enduring qualities of the honor and dignity in an honest day's work. Through familiar scenes of the ordinary and the everyday, their works are a testament to the essential connectedness of people to their environment, offering an intimate glimpse into their respective worlds. As curator of the show, it has been an honor to work with one of America's renowned photographers and his family over the last 2 years, and that the Farnsworth is proud to hold the first exhibition to show Tice's Maine works in the place that inspired it, and the first to pair the two artists together. George Tice is one of America's foremost photographers of the urban landscape and has been called, quote, urban romantic, which is one of the titles of his many books. His works ranged from the resolutely rural, like the work he did with the Amish, to the haunting still lives of an urban and suburban America whose tableau of decay and casual abandonment reveal a country in the throes of change and yet somehow still cling to the idealized past. Tice is unusual, perhaps unique, in his affection for the forms that define our landscapes and for his uncanny eye, as sensitive as Walker Evans's, as precise as Eugene Aget's, for capturing images that are at once immediate and timeless, simultaneously modern and classic. What you are about to see is his own selection of some of his best images, a striking collection from 5 decades of consistently outstanding work. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker today, Mr. George Tice. Thank you very much.
Okay, what you're seeing on the screen looks like a big book, but it's actually a pocket book. It's from David Godine's series, Pocket Parasol, he calls them. So this was 53 from the beginning of my photography to 99 when I selected my best pictures at the time. And the range of work. The thing about people like me is that we always knew what we were going to do. Truman Capote. Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. John Lennon. Life's too short to do the same thing twice. Man Ray. Just do the steps that you've been shown by everyone you've ever known until the dance becomes your very own. Jackson Browne. The most that can be expected of any artist is that he observe life closely and see it as it really is. From a note on Thomas Wolfe. The mission of photography is to explain man to man, and each man to himself. Edward Steichen. To be a poet, most of all to see, if I am no poet, I have nothing to lose. Henrik Ibsen. It takes the passage of time before an image of a commonplace subject can be assessed. The great difficulty of what I attempt is seeing beyond the moment. The everydayness of life gets in the way of the eternal. George Tice. Okay, now we're back to Dorrance Photoshop, which is actually part of my lifelong series, urban landscapes, which are all New Jersey. And here I had to, the man that built this camera was about 90 years old. And I told him I'd like to photograph it, but I'd have to get up on the roof. And he brought out a ladder and I climbed up and did this. It's actually in the rain. And this I make as a little tiny print. It maybe about 5 inches high, and here it is more than 10 or 12 inches high. But it's on a lake in New Jersey, and the sun reflecting on the water leads right to the sailboat and the figure. And this is commonly known as Golden Boy. And this was an illustration of this was on every A&T phone book. And I drove up there and there was a guard there and I asked him, could I photograph Golden Boy? And he said, sure, people come by here every day. And then I got out my 8x10 camera and he didn't expect that. He expected I'd have a little hand camera. And I set up, I wanted to set up and I wanted to frame his penis in the coils that were draped across the Atlantic to be able to communicate. And this is from an ice series I've done. It's my first view camera work. Before that, all work was done with a hand camera. And for one winter, I would go out every Saturday and go to a creek and photograph. Water towers are almost a theme in themselves that I've done. So it comes up in several of my pictures. Where's the book? Oh. So in the introduction to this pocket paragon, David Godine wrote, where does it begin? He has the sensibilities of an urban romantic, the title of one of his books. And his work ranges from the resolutely rural, the Amish still clinging to a lifestyle that has all but vanished in modern times, to haunting still lives of urban and suburban America, whose tableau of decay and casual abandonment, of genuinely majestic contradictions, the massive water tower of Rahway, New Jersey, rising incongruously behind a hoary oak, reveal a country in the throes of change, and yet somehow still clinging to an idealized past. Now, someone might want to edit this and read it themselves as an introduction. There's more to it than this, but it's on the flap copy of the book. And when I was 14, I was a coin collector and I had a couple of American gold pieces. and I sold them, and I bought a Kodak Pony camera. And I went over to the Bowery and photographed the homeless men. Most of whom were alcoholic. This is taken inside a corn crib. And that's about all I can say about it. This old woman and boy were taken in Shelby County, Tennessee, when I was stationed at the Naval Air Station in Memphis. And this woman, I believe, was born a slave because she was over 100 years old. And this was taken in 1957 or 58. And I'm amazed by their dignity. The boy is got one sock on, and he's trying to hide the barefoot, and his pants are ripped. But he could have grown up to be Cassius Clay or Muhammad Ali. Again in Memphis, we're aboard the Memphis Queen on the Mississippi River. And I just heard on the news that this bridge that goes from Arkansas to Memphis is, I found cracks in it. So that's not usable at the moment. So of my 1950s pictures, this is one I consider a favorite. And this is Kitty. Also from Memphis. No, she was from Arkansas. And she was a girlfriend of Elvis Presley, and that's how I met her. She had these pictures of photographs of her and Elvis, and she didn't have the negatives, and she asked if I'd copy them. And I made copies for her. And this was taken one time when we were out all night, and this is in the early morning. I haven't heard from her since. I call this Country Road. And I was actually waiting for a horse and buggy. I was in the Amish country. And I was waiting for a horse and buggy to come down the road. And the sun, which you could see is right over the car, out of the picture, was just about to go behind a cloud, and I would have lost the lighting. But I got this picture and I didn't know what to do with it because I was working on the Amish. But it's become my best-selling picture. This is a little village in Vermont. And I got there early morning, and you can see the frost in all the foreground on the grasses. But it's an ideal New English town. And this is my first wife.
Second wife.
What?
Second wife. Second wife.
Oh, it's my second. It's my second wife. And I married her when she was 16. And we were married for 1960 to 1975.
15 years.
And she produced 4 daughters, Lori, Lisa, Lynn, and Jennifer. And now she works for me a couple of days a week. Picnic on Garrett Mountain. It's in Patterson. hottest day of the year. Girls all have their shirts off. And I love this picture. And there's Lynn, she's now how old?
57.
57. She's now 57 years old. But this is one of my favorite portraits of her. I was commissioned by the city of New York to do a poster for them. And it was just to have the title, New York, New York. This is when that song was popular. And they said I could do whatever I want. So I looked up to the 61st floor of the Chrysler Building, and I said, I'd like to be up there. So I went up there and found out there was 4 of these gargoyles. No, 8 of these gargoyles, 2 on each corner. And the first pictures I took, I got back and developed them. There was something about them I didn't like. And I went back and did it over again. Now it's become a famous picture. This New York skyline looks nothing like today as it did then. There's all buildings in the foreground. I'm photographing it from across the Hudson River in New Jersey. I got there before sunrise. And as the sun rose, and I got it in this cloud, which to me resembled a lobster's claw with a pearl. From my Amish series, from the book Fields of Peace, a Pennsylvania German album, I got this horse and buggy just as it was going over the hill. And this I mistakenly titled a pitchfork, but it's a hay fork. So I changed the title. It's gone through 3 publishers, sold quite well. Old Amish men. They were selling the contents of a farm, and I was there with my wife, and I acted as though I was photographing her because they were a little nervous when they saw my camera, but it looked like I was photographing her, but it was actually shooting over her shoulder. I'd love to know what they were talking about. And this has become a very famous picture. In fact, I collect paintings, drawings that I find in art shows and that, and I buy them. And I've got about 6 or 7 of them now, and that's just what I've come across. But they were coming down the hill, and I asked them to go up. And I met up with their father that afternoon, and he didn't appreciate my photographing them. Amish children playing in the snow. I stopped the car. They made their own pose. They started throwing snowballs at me. And they started shaking the car. I thought they might turn it over. But it's a very fun picture. I had been working from 1960 to 1965 as a home portrait photographer, and I got real tired of it and thought, let me try my luck in California. So I moved to California, and while there, I visited this ghost town of Bodie, California, an old gold and silver mining town. And the conditions were just beautiful with the clouds one day and then one day without clouds. I only had 2 days to work there. And here, I've gone back there since, and this gravestone, which is actually wood, was no longer readable, native of Ireland, and her name, and it's split in half. And this is the Methodist Church in Bodie. And I believe the last service there was held in 1927. I began a series of trees. This was in California. And when did I do this series? 64, 65. And now I began using an 8x10 camera. And I started photographing aquatic plants. And if I had a pointer in my hand, I'd point out the frog. If I point at it, will it show up?
No.
No. Well, there's probably more frogs than one in that picture, but an oak tree. This was purchased by the Museum of Modern Art. It hung there for a couple of years. And it's now dying. And this was from a series I did in the Catskills called Peekamoose. It was private land, 6.5 square miles. I was commissioned to photograph it each season by the owners of the estate. And this is probably one of the best ones I've come up with, except for the waterfalls. They had several waterfalls on the property. This is like having 2 waterfalls, one at the very bottom, and then that fallen tree across the rocks. And this photograph is from a children's book I did, Goodbye River, Goodbye. And that is the Battenkill River in Vermont. And as you can see, the only thing that's still is the rock leaning into the water, and then the moving water leaves its own traces. We're still in Peekamoose. And of course, I did this one in winter. And this is from Seacoast, Maine. This is from the Shakers community at Sabbath Day Lake. And there was only a few of the Shakers left, about 6 or 7. And at one point, the Shakers, they were all women. And the Shakers took in orphans at one time. So there might be a couple of those still alive. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I'm trying to find a letter that she wrote me after I took this picture and sent her a copy, that her husband had died in the meantime and how important the picture was to her. So I'm still looking for the letter. This house was built by Rockwell Kent, and it has been the home of Jamie Wyeth for many years. And I was actually photographing Jamie in the opposite direction, but I kept looking over my shoulder at this. And after I did a double take, then I did two frames of it. And one was awkward and this one was beautiful. We're in Rockland, Maine now. This is Keenan's Barbershop. Little signs on there. It says razor cut. I remember when they gave razor cuts. They didn't use scissors. And now we're on Monhegan Island with this empty clothesline, except for the clothespins. And this is from Paterson, New Jersey. And it's called Tree with Carvings. People would have carved their initials into the tree. That's in the shape of a human figure. And as the tree aged, the initials that they carved into the tree were more or less obliterated. From Paterson, New Jersey, car for sale. The only thing that's left, well, it's been replaced by some kind of an apartment house, but the only original thing that's left here, and these houses all date from different times. The house on the right is very early. That's a projects in the middle. And this house on the left with an E on it, never learned what the E stood for. And the garage is the only thing that's standing there. And this is the Passaic Falls. It's more commonly known today as the Great Falls. And it's second only to Niagara on the East Coast. It's 77 feet. And it was Alexander Hamilton and Lafayette and somebody else, George Washington maybe. They had a picnic there and they decided that this should be a source of the water power. And it became a manufacturing city. And I've done 2 books 30 years apart on Paterson. We're still in Paterson, Joe's Barbershop. It was about to close down because Route 80 was coming through. And we have a picture of a naked lady, a calendar on the wall above the sink. And I love the lighting, which is almost impossible, the bright highlights of the sun and the deep shadows. But a couple of weeks after that, it was gone. Here I was commissioned by the Museum of Modern Art to photograph what would become Liberty Park, near the Statue of Liberty. And That figure is my assistant, Bill Abronowitz. And this was done in 1970s, maybe. This is my most famous picture at its mobile station. And of course, taken at night, or not quite night, so that I had some light in the sky. Was taken over a period of maybe 15 minutes or so, because I had to get the light in the sky and then I had to get the artificial light. And to say that it's my most famous picture, it's also probably my favorite photograph. And this is during that same assignment from the Museum of Modern Art to photograph Liberty, what was to be Liberty Park. And here we got the Twin Towers in the distance. I composed it so that the smokestack on the houseboat was in line with the towers. And then on the very right are two towers, and that's Ellis Island, where the immigrants came in. And I photographed them without this couple, but they came back home while my camera was still up, and climbed the ladder and turned around and said, well, take our picture. So they had to move from there. They didn't know it at the time, but they had to move out for the construction of Liberty Park. This is one of my most famous photographs. White Castle hamburgers, I grew up with them. They're not in every state. They're only in about 7 or 8 states. And I photographed it from the back because I wanted to get the road on the right, which were all these rings pattern. And it's in the collection of the Newark Museum of Art and many other museum collections. My work is actually over in more than 150 collections worldwide. But whenever the Newark Museum publishes this picture, they crop off this road. And when I see it, I have a chance to change it. But the person who crops it, the designer or whatever, they don't like it in, and I want it in. Used to buy these, you'd get an ad in the paper with this coupon, get 10 White Castles for $1. And then you'd be a little sick afterwards. But I made this exposure. I didn't have my timer with me, but right through the diner window was a clock with a second hand. And this was like a 20-second exposure. And as people passed in the car, they would stop or slow down and look at me. And I thought, somebody's going to get in an accident. I better get out of there. And I hope I got it. The Strand Theater. This is in Keyport, New Jersey. It's now a laundromat. But this is when the movie's they're playing 2 porno films. Let's see, what are they? One is Meatball. On the very right, it's Meatball, and somebody scribbles on it in crayon, come in and meet Miss Jones. She was the star of the show. Oh, and the other one on the left side was The Devil in Miss Jones. I saw them both. The Devil in Miss Jones was best. Here's a beautiful tree in a very industrial area. On the left, we're looking at a cathedral, and the river, forgot the name of the river, goes through the heart of Newark. And this, it's raining. It's raining in this picture, which adds some atmosphere. This is Artie Van Blarcom. He's a 52-year-old bachelor who lives in the same house he grew up in with his brother Billy. And he's watering his backyard garden. I took a liking to him and thought he'd be an interesting subject for a book, and he was. And I worked on it for a couple of years. And here he's getting a haircut from Barbara Joe. He takes his vacation on the Jersey Shore and rents the very same bungalow his parents rented when he was a child. And this is Deborah, an old girlfriend of mine, and I bought a soft focus lens to photograph her with. This is a lens that softens the whole picture. It's sharp, but the highlights glow. And she's going to come with me, Lisa, and Lynn on our trip to Maine.
They don't need to know that.
And she is on the Jersey Shore. This is the picture of all of them I've taken of her that she likes best. Here she's wearing my white uniform, my sailor suit. And then I started photographing the cat. So I still had the lens. And you could see the glow around the cat, the effect that it has. And there's three in this, well, four. So these are 35 millimeter. And this one is not the same cat, but my daughter collected white cats. One of my daughters, Laurie. And this was taken with an 8x10 view camera. And I took about 10 frames, and 9 of them, the cat is blurred. And this one, there's just a little movement in his head, but that's okay. In 1983, I was invited to the Soviet Union to lead a group of photographers to photograph. And we also visited a few other Soviet countries. This was in Tallinn. And the boy was just given a piece of gum. And this mailman turned the corner. And I think the boy has been cautioned not to talk to strangers. So there's a little tension there. Lincoln. I became very interested in Lincoln in 1981 and began the series of pictures This one is taken in Newark, New Jersey, in front of the courthouse. And he has all this graffiti on his back, which is in probably in Spanish. That's actually my car that looks like it's sitting on the bench top. That's a Peugeot. I had two of them, actually. This is in Chicago. Little girls eating an ice cream cone. And some of these statues really deteriorate in a strange way. Lincoln has black eyes. And this is taken in the rain in Columbus, Ohio. And that's another monument between his legs. Another book I did is called Hometowns. And this is the hometown of James Dean in Fairmount, Indiana. James Dean, who died in 1955 at age 25. And I was very affected by him and his acting. And that's James Dean's motorcycle. All these pictures were taken after his death, and this was sitting in the basement for years. And I asked if I could wheel it out and take it in front of the barn, as you see it. And then James Dean's cousin, who's the farmer who owns the farm, he became very rich for merchandising the rights to use James Dean's sunglasses. He had this completely restored and gave it to the Fairmount Historical Society. And it's in a lucite casing. And there's nothing left of James Dean except underneath all the new paint and new tires and everything else. I think it's a Czechoslovakian motorcycle. And then I went to Ronald Reagan's hometown, which is Dixon, Illinois. And this is his high school yearbook. The shape of these photographs is D for Dixon. That's Ronald Reagan in the very upper right. With a typo, it actually says Donald Reagan. And it says his motto is, I can read it better in a print. Life is one grand sweet ball, so let's start the music. Something like that. And one of these was sent to, of the book was sent to Nancy Reagan, and she showed it to Ronald. And he wrote me a wonderful letter of how the book took him on a trip down memory lane. God bless you. And he wrote a bit more. I never met him. And here's the laundromat. I think this soap dispenser or treats, no, it's treats, next to a Royal Crown and kind of a dry machine. And I think it says ooh la la somewhere. And we have a seascape above it and a stuffed swordfish. And then I went to Hannibal, Missouri, the hometown of Mark Twain. And this old picture of the police department was stuck in the window. And this old barber, what is his name?
Leo Cooper.
Leo Cooper. I asked him if I could photograph the shop. And Mark Twain last visited to the town in 1910. I think he was living then. And my assistant that was with me, she took, well, we came back afterwards and gave them some pictures. And he was in the hospital. He had fallen off the roof trying to fix it. And I thought he was a goner, but he wasn't. But the shop was closed and everything was for sale. They had an auction. And she bought the clock Orange Crush, which is over his head. And when she got it home and plugged it in, time ran backward. And over on the right, if you see a cross crucifix, just below it is a sign that says, earth has no sorrow that heaven cannot cure. I bought that for, I think, $2. And then I got a fellowship to go to England and photographed Yorkshire. And this boy, we were out, and his father and mother, we stopped at a tavern right near here. And the boy ran out, and he's done this before, but he ran up there and he was just perfect, his formation, the separation of his arms and legs. And then about a year ago, he got married and they invited me to the wedding. And I didn't even recognize him, but went to the wedding. And I gave him and his mother and father a print of this. This is Yorkshire en route to Whitby. Whitby's on the seashore town. Jack Robinson's Barometer. Again in Yorkshire. This is a gypsy fortune teller in
Whitby.
Whitby. Whitby's right on the coast. And this is how Dracula begins. He's on a ship, and the ship takes him in between these two lighthouses that are there. And so then I got into Bram Stoker, the writer. Stairway to Whitby Abbey. And then I got interested in genealogy and learned that my ancestors arrived in America in 1663. And where they lived became known as Ticetown. So I photographed Ticetown, which became another book. So altogether I've had 24 books published. Ticetown, Flowering Apple Tree, Fallen Apples, The Homestead, can't tell you how many Tices were born in that house, but it eventually collapsed. Came back one time and it was just after a snowstorm, it just all collapsed. And one of the descendants took the front porch to put it on in his own house. And this is, my ancestors were boatmen. And this is a wrecked boat in Ticetown. And we're back to Portland, Maine, furniture store. And that's it. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, George. That was an excellent presentation. We would like to take the opportunity to invite our listening audience to view the exhibition, George Tice, Andrew Wyeth, Parallel Visions, which opens to the public on Saturday, June 12th through November 1st, 2021. Thank you all again for attending, and I hope that you enjoy the show. Thank you.